For more perspective on women in the workforce, CGTN's Rachelle Akuffo spoke with Amie Batson. She's the executive director of Women Lift Health. Rachelle began by asking about the domino effect of so many women leaving the workforce because of the pandemic.
We've seen it in terms of how it's playing out in the economy, of course, but seeing what it means for individual women. And so as of right now, we're seeing women in particular are suffering from the burnout effects of the pandemic. In fact, there are reports that 1 in 4 women, 1 in 4 are considering slowing down their careers or leaving the workforce entirely. And when you look around and see actually at the individual level, looking at my own friends and colleagues and seeing how this has played out at that level, one colleague, for example, just forced into this impossible situation of, she's a highly paid professional, decades in the workforce, but then lost her childcare. And when schools went virtual, suddenly had young children struggling to sit in front of the Zoom and do schoolwork. And so was, juggling toddlers, younger children, and of course, still being responsible for her very, very challenging and demanding career. And she simply couldn't do it all. And there's a quote that in the COVID economy, you could have either a child or a job, but not both. And I think that's what we've seen is women being put in this impossible situations of not being able to do it all, given the the structures and policies that exist.
And you raise a very key point there. I mean, we did see that women of color, single mothers, and minimum wage earners have been particularly hard hit. But as these businesses reopened, we did see that a lot of these schools didn't reopen the same way. They were either still virtual or had some sort of hybrid model. A lot of daycares didn't reopen, or a lot of people had lost their childcare. So what lessons then can be learned from this as we try and look towards a post-pandemic economic recovery that does include women in a more meaningful way and support them better?
Well, I think it's become very clear that we need to be thinking about how can we create workplaces where women can both work and have a job. And I would say actually men too. We need to be creating workplaces where families can both work and have a job. And to do that, we need to first and foremost think about childcare. We need, especially in the US, to be investing much more in affordable, quality childcare. We need to be thinking about kind of the policies like parental leave. I mean, it's actually quite shocking. In the US, versus the rest of the world, you see parental leave on average for 14 months, for example, in Europe. Whereas in the US, on average, we get maternity leave, not parental, and it's for 10 weeks. And it's often unpaid or only partially paid. So childcare, parental leave, and then more flexibility in the workplace. I think possibly one of the positives out of COVID is it's shown us what everyone thought was impossible, that you don't all have to be going into the same workplace, that you don't have to be traveling around the world for in-person meetings all the time, that in fact, we can be quite successful using technology to work remotely. And it's these 3 changes in particular that would have such an impact on enabling women to go back to work knowing their children are safe, are being cared for, and that they have the resources necessary to address it.
So now that we do have a sense of what is possible, recap what the Marshall Plan does for mothers, what it aims to do, and the difference it can really make to working moms.
Yeah, well, so the Marshall Plan is this great idea in a country that has deeply values family, deeply values children, motherhood, but also values work and recognizes the importance of women in the workforce. The Marshall Plan for moms is effectively a playbook to make workplaces work for working moms. And so it includes a Bill of Rights. And so the drafters of the Marshall Plan for Moms went out and interviewed, well over 1,000 women to understand what were the challenges that they were facing. And what they heard back was what drove this Bill of Rights. And it includes things like giving moms maximum control over their schedules. So this remote working, remote hours, and flexibility there. It includes support for childcare. It includes workplace policies that promote gender equality at home, like incentivizing paternity leave. So it's not just women taking time out of the workplace to have children, but men also take time out and get to have the benefits of caring for their children. It includes, of course, having a fair and living wage, and so many other really important critical points that would enable a really truly working environment for working moms.
So then in terms of the progress that this has made in Congress, or even for other companies that are trying to enforce these things, where do things stand right now?
I think it's getting visibility. That's the good news. I think that for the first time, COVID has really shown a spotlight on the unsustainability of our system, on the pain that it's caused. And so, it's getting play, and it's getting some fantastic ideas that are taking long-standing ideas, long-standing, knowledge that women have had about what hasn't worked, and trying to start translating them into active economic policies to make change. Will we get all the way there? It's really hard to know. I mean, it comes down to, will governments and companies learn from what we've seen in COVID, and will they make these investments in affordable childcare? Will they continue to allow the kind of flexible working conditions that we've seen and working remotely, or will they start demanding everybody be traveling everywhere or centralizing again into the buildings?
Obviously, this is a global issue. We did see 54 million women left the workforce amid the pandemic. You mentioned what some other countries and governments can be doing. In terms of global comparisons of what's being done in the workforce that does support women, whether it's pay, opportunities for advancement, parental support, which economies are getting it right, and what are they doing?
Yeah, well, you see a lot of the Scandinavian countries, for example, where the governments are heavily subsidizing daycare for all children, and they have one of the highest rates of female labor participation in the world, where you see the kind of parental leave policies that I mentioned. And again, these are almost every country in Europe has these extensive parental leave that enable parents to stay with their child, and when it's a newborn, let it reach a level of maturity, and then has the subsidized and available high quality childcare for their child to go to while they return to the workforce. And that is paying off. We still see a lot of pay inequality. It ranges dramatically around the world. On average, I think the number's around 77%, but that's, in some countries, that's as low as 40 cents on the dollar. So for a woman doing the exact same work as a man, she could be paid as little as 40 cents of 40% of what that man is paid. In the US, it's probably around 82 cents on the dollar. It's appalling that at this point in time, women can be doing the exact same thing as a man and still be paid markedly less. So I think we see countries in Scandinavian countries across Europe, Israel, these are countries that have really been investing in having families and having workforce, and it's paid off. The benefits show up in terms of women returning to the workforce, and the benefits show up in the children as well, because all of these children have quality childcare that helps prepare them to go to school.